Welcome back. We are joined all the way from Germany by Andreas to give us a rundown on web security for newcomers. Andreas is a professional software engineer since 2011, both as an engineer and a manager for both national German and international companies. He wrote his first line of code around 2006, and in the last few years has been working as a freelance consultant. Andreas is also a lecturer at universities for software engineering, testing, architecture, and web security. Andreas considers himself a full-stack developer, but prefers the back end. His primary programming language is Python, followed by JavaScript and TypeScript. And Andreas really wants to hear your questions for the end of the session so we can answer them live. So don't forget to get them into the list because we're a little behind you and we'll miss them if you're not quick. Over to you, Andreas.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I can just empathize, really ask your questions. It's for newcomers, so yeah, just ask them and I'm happy to answer them if I can, but probably I should be able to do so. Okay, so I'm not doing some slides because sometimes I think it can be a little bit boring. So I reworked it and now it's a web page. It's not publicly because it's full of security bugs and we are just investigating the security bugs I put in there. And yeah, let's see if we can find solutions for them. We are starting with I think every web page has a very simple search bar. Maybe you wouldn't think there could go so many things wrong, but we will see about a few things which can go wrong from a security perspective. So I'm maybe just searching a little bit, welcome PyCon Australia. And well, we have no search results, but we have it says well, here, what I searched. And I also added a little bit of JavaScript in here, so a little bit SBA feeling. If we are when I'm changing the search query, it's also changing directly here. So welcome from Germany, it is changing here. It's a very, very simple feature which we have on web pages. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, there are security concerns we have to address here. So imagine you're sharing this link with somebody else because I'm using a query parameter. You cannot see that here. I see. Okay. I'm using a query parameter here. It's in the URL. It's just if we look into the form here, it's quite simple. You see it as a form with the method action get. You cannot see. Oh, that's damn. I never thought about that. Okay, I'm sorry. We cannot see the developer toolbar, but okay, you just have to believe me. It's with the get method. And somebody shares this with you. And when somebody shares this with you, and it's an evil person, something like that can happen. Right now, it's just a JavaScript alert, but it could be a lot of more things. For example, it could be a whole phishing attack. Yeah, right now, the attacker, it used my search form very, very simple. It was just displaying that there are no search results, but an attacker can use this to run a phishing attack because as soon as he or she can execute JavaScript on my web page, he could actually just say, well, I'm deleting the whole HTML elements in there, truncate the body in the HTML, and just put their own forms in there and grab the user data. Yeah, imagine something like that happening in your online banking. I wouldn't be so happy about that to lose all of my money there. Very, very simple. Let's have a look at how this could happen actually. Yeah. What happened is, I'm just realizing that you cannot see it, but let's have a look into the source code. I hope you can see this. View source. Change? Yes, great. Let's have a look into the search code. What was happening here? Because if you want to switch to full screen. Oh, no, it's fine. I just found a workaround with the view source. We can use this. So you can see here, I'm returning what was shared, what the user entered into the search bar, and I just displaying it here. And here it is empty. I just wrote it in here that it is empty. But if we look into the source code in the HTML, it's actually not empty. There is a script in it. And what the attacker did was actually quite easy. He just entered into this very nice search form script. For me, it's like I prepared it with evil.js, but it could be anything else. I'm just entering this one here, clicking on search, and now it's happening in here. I could enter anything I want there, and it's just executing it here. Yeah, script tag, alert. This is worrying. And it's appearing in there. Unlike the alert, it's a very, well, let's say it's very nice from the attacker just to do a JavaScript alert. But as I said, it can be used for phishing attacks as well. It can be used for phishing attacks as well. The problem is, well, actually, it's called non-persistent XSS. The problem is we can put into the HTTP request, which is behind every browser interaction. What you're doing is actually a HTTP request. And when we're using the HTTP request, the data the user entered there directly and returning it in our response. For example, like I did, I just returned it in the template in here and just said, whatever the user entered, I will return in here. Then it will be executed in there. That's quite bad. As I said, like most common vector is then the phishing attacks. And it's valid for everything. So like if you're using URL parameters or you're using forms, it can be even a user agent. I have seen it once that an attack was done via a user agent. Yeah, so that's quite bad. And it cannot just happen if you're just doing it as a backend developer. Yeah, you're just returning in the template. It can be also done when you're using the HTTP request data, so for especially the URL parameters, and you're just using some little bit of JavaScript. You want to display it like I did before with this little bit of SPA feeling. Even then, we still have actually the same result. There's one thing which is very, very evil, which is the inner HTML property in JavaScript. So every HTML element, you can set some inner HTML, well, at least if it's a block element, and put in there a very nice shortcut. You do not have to create the elements by hand if you're using vanilla.js and so on. But it is really a security concern because we can just enter some script tags in there, and then, well, we are open for this vulnerability here. However, there is a very, very simple solution to that. Usually I would ask if we are like in present, so like if anybody has an idea, but I'm just going to spoil it in here. The solution is escaping. And of course, do not use inner HTML. If we are escaping this, then the result we are seeing here is not like empty and directly the HTML element, but the very, let's say, the very evil characters like these, how is it called? Greater and smaller sign. These greater and smaller signs, they're going to be escaped into HTML entities, and they're no longer valid HTML code. So it's really about when a user is entering some of the data, what we do not want is that we are using the user content directly as valid HTML. So we are escaping it, and in this way, we make sure that this cannot happen. Just a little bit so that you go out with this talk, and you have some new buzzwords you can put into the next pull request. Let's say the backend side is called non-persistent XSS, and the frontend side is Dom Based Xss. It's still the same. It's still a cross-site scripting attack, but a different name. It's called non-persistent on the backend side because it uses the HTTP request. So it is like it's not stored anywhere, this attack. It's really just working with this one request. If I'm changing the requests by changing the URL parameters, it's a different one, so it's not persistent. And the front-end part is called Dom Based, because with inner HTML, we are manipulating the DOM. XSS, it's the name for it. I never mentioned it, I'm so sorry. Cross-site scripting. So like we are actually, my evil JS is not from my site, but from a different site. So it's a cross-site scripting attack. Okay. Usually any questions already? So I would really like, because like the next one would be like a little bit of a different, still the search form, but a little bit different. So maybe there are already some questions for this part. So DOM-based or non-persistent XSS? Doesn't seem so. Okay, I will just continue. Okay, so I will just continue a little bit. Well, we are not doing the exercise. It's or when I'm doing a workshop, I also have some little exercises and stuff like that. But today we're just going on the theoretical part here. The next thing I'm doing in here is like, okay, my product owner, he wants me to add the Google Tag Manager snippet, and it's just like a script text. So I'm just gonna add it, and I'm done with the ticket and can move on with some more interesting stuff, hopefully. And yeah, well, let's go to the page which is now tracked by the Google Tag Manager. Well, now I have a problem. Now it says I'm an evil Google Tag Manager. And it also says it's persistently happening. Oh, well, let's see. I'm just reloading this page. I'm not using the link. Maybe it's an evil link. Oh, sorry. Maybe it's an evil link. So I'm not going to use this link, and I go directly to the page to make sure I'm not going to do the same thing. So I'm going to execute it and say, okay, well, I'm going to do this one. Now it's happening again. It's not the link. Something else is happening. And what is happening here is a persistent XSS attack, as you said. So there is no DOM-based manipulation. We do not know that, but I'm gonna tell you it's not. And it's not a non-persistent XSS attack, because like even if I change the HTTP request, it's still gonna happen. What happened here is actually a typo. Yeah. If you look are you seeing my alert actually? I hope so. What was happening in here is it was a Google Tag Manager with a Q. So instead of the G, it was a Q. And if you think this is not going to happening, it is actually quite often. There are a couple of stories where like these simple typos really were. Yeah, Patrick. Yeah, I saw that as well. I just checked. I'm really sorry. This takes away a lot of the experience with the alert messages. I'm so sorry. I did not experience that earlier. Damn it. Maybe we should switch over to the full screen. Could you change that for me, please? Because I'm not sure if I can. Can I? Ah, yes, I can. Great. So guys, now it's looking a little bit more different. Let me reload the page, and now you can see, hopefully, the messages in here. So you see here now, if the alert message in here. Now I'm an evil Google Tag Manager persistently, and it's just happening that this typo is causing this JS. And in the past, there were some attacks with these typos. So for example, we had some problems with npm packages where there was, I'm sorry, I just forgot the one name. There was one package, there was one with a dash and one without a dash. Maybe somebody knows and can put it into the chat, but just blank in my memory right now. There was one with a dash and one without a dash. one of the ones, I still cannot say which one is the correct one and which one was the malicious one, but let's say the dash one was the malicious one, you would not know them. Yeah, it's this exactly the same name. There's just a dash. You would just take this npm package and use, and you have an Xss attack. So you have to be very, very careful if you're using third-party software that you're using the correct one, which is also safe. Which means like never trust anybody. You cannot trust your user's input at all. We have seen this with the non-persistent and with the Dom Based Xss, but we cannot even trust some open source software because even them are vulnerable for Xss attacks. Well, at least the social factor and human mistakes. This kind of Xss is called persistent Xss because it's not based on the request or on the DOM, but the malicious code is stored somewhere. In this case, it will be stored in the version control, but it can also be stored in the database. And then it's delivered to users, again, without escaping. Yeah, that's the most important one. It's without escaping. If I would escape it, would not happening. Well, with persistence, a little bit more wrong. I want to share a little anecdote about a very nice attack. It was actually like a two-step attack. There was a customer of mine. They had an e-commerce system, which was a little bit of old, and they had some vulnerabilities. So the attacker managed to get access to the database. We will look into that, how that was possible that he got access to the database in a minute. But more importantly, in this database, there was a very nice field. It was for the product owner to add some of these snippets, to add the Google Tag Manager snippet or some of his web tracking tools, whatever he's doing for web analytics. And what the attacker did, they used this field. They put a lot of blank lines into it, and then they put this Google Tag Manager with a Q. So actually, I took it from them. And this Google Tag Manager with the Q was hosted on a Russian server, and they did a phishing attack on our checkout, which was really, really bad for us because the phishing attack was like they created a pop-up directly over the credit card iframe. So the users entered the credit card data and they thought, oh, well, I'm just entering my credit card data. Everything is fine. I'm not on a malicious domain, anything. Everything was fine. It was just some JavaScript in there from somewhere else. They enter it. They have shown an error. Well, you did a mistake entering your credit card data. The user, very, very nice. Oh, well, I'm going to try it again. But they closed their malicious pop-up, and then they entered the correct data in the correct iframe. So there was no way. So the users, they did not complain that there was something like a phishing attack because they were not able to detect it. And we didn't realize that the attacker grabbed the credit card data. So this was really a very, very bad situation because if you're in Europe, I don't know actually about Australia, I'm very, very happy, share it in the chat about some data protection regulations in Australia. Maybe you have something similar. But in Europe, it is with the GDPR, which is like active, I think, for over 2 years now. You have within 48 hours, you have to write a very formal document, put it to the authority. So there's for every city, for every state, there is an official data protection officer, and you have to write him a very formal letter explaining, oh, we realized we had like a data breach. There might be some customer data, and then you have to fill out like what customer data, payment data, etc., and so on. And if you're lucky, they say, well, you solved the issue, everything is fine, you will get a warning. But if you're like an internet company who is like doing a lot of your revenue with your e-commerce system, so which means you have tech knowledge, you can get a penalty. And the worst thing is, it is not the company you're working for, but it's like your mother company. So, for example, your investor, if you're like a startup, it could be also your investor who has to pay like this penalty, and it can be up to, I think it's up to 10% of the 1 year gross revenue. So it is a very high penalty they can put for you just to be vulnerable for Xss attacks. There's one project I want to share with you, which is called the OWASP. It's the Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP. And OWASP, they have a lot of information and documentation about all possible web security problems. So for example, they have a very extensive XSS prevention cheat sheet. You see it here, like it's a very, very long one on very detailed what you can do, everything against it. To be honest, you can never trust data except in allowed locations. Fun fact, there are no allowed locations anyway. And then always encode, always. If it's HTML elements, attributes, JavaScript data, even CSS, it is possible. For me, it's some black magic, but even for me, it's some black magic. But it's like you could do an Xss attack with CSS because there are these URL fields where you can load from somewhere else. So even with that, you have to be very, very sensitive, and you have to always escape the data in there. Sanitize your HTML markup, which is actually almost the same like escaping, which means like, okay, clean it up, make sure that there are no malicious elements, that if somebody is allowed to enter HTML, sanitize it, make sure it's just maybe in a headline and a strong text, but especially no script talks or anything like that. This is very, very bad, actually. The recommendation number 7, avoid JavaScript URLs, which is like with HTML5 and this very modern routing in React and Angular. Actually, they say this is vulnerable for Xss attacks. It's actually the same angle like we have seen with the search field, right? You have the URL. I could try to put some script tag into the URL, and the router would just show it and execute it. Would be very, very bad. Well, on the other hand, the React and Angular developers, I'm pretty sure that they are very familiar with XSS and how to avoid it, and they're going to take care of that, fortunately for us. But still, it's from a security perspective, it is an angle you have to keep in mind. Prevent Dom Based Xss. There's something very, very interestingly. React is calling this renaming this inner HTML property. They call it dangerously set inner HTML, just to make it very, very visible that this is open for Xss attacks. Then there's some more things, some bonus rules, but I'm not gonna go into that one because I see that I'm running completely out of time. I'm just talking about XSS. Let's have a look at the second attack, which has almost the same solution for it. So, which is, I have again a search field, but this time I'm going to filter the articles. I have three pairs of shoes I'm selling here. So all of them are very stylish and comfortable, but the first one, or the second one is a premium, and there's the last one. And what I can do is I can just filter them. And from the database, it says, okay, only the products within E and this highlighted attribute are going to be shown. I think everybody has done something like that, very simple. Oh, there's a form. I'm going to grab the data in there and build my SQL statement around it. Problem is, what I could do is run an Sql injection attack. And I have prepared this one here. And what I did is here, I just added this one. And this is not supposed to happening, yeah? Because I just add a product in here which doesn't cost anything, which is actually quite nice for me as a user when I'm using this Sql injection attack. But I could also use it to read the data. I could also use it to truncate the database, which would really be bad because, well, we are developers. We all know that most companies, most companies I've seen at least, they have a very poor backup system. or not sure, or not able to do any recovery in time when the database is truncated, apart from the data loss you have anyway, at least for 1 day. So that's actually quite bad. And what is happening in here is, I hope you can. Yeah, you're now seeing my screen, so you can see it. What is happening in here is you see it actually in the URL because I did this again as a get form. This %27, it's it's like the quote sign, and then I'm closing it, yeah, because it's a filter, so it's somewhere in the where statement. So I'm closing the parameter which should be used here, saying, well, quote semicolon SQL statement ended. Then I am injecting my SQL statement, so it's an insert into products with the values. You can see them here. Yeah, you have to be a little bit trained with this %20 and %21, but let's skip to the end and saying this is until here. It's all of the insert. You can say it here. So like product was added. This is the last property. We can see it in here, so it worked. And then I'm just like opening again the statement so that it still works. So nobody knows I sneaked in this SQL statement into the middle, which was right now just this little adding the product. And this is an SQL injection attack. Problem, every time you're using, again, user-generated data in your SQL statements, you're not vulnerable for Xss attack in this case, but SQL injection. Actually, it's the same side of the story, but database instead of HTML side. So what you can do is actually the same escaping. So if you're using something like SQL Alchemy, for example, so an ORM, object relational mapper, you're not writing the SQL statements your own any longer. And this is the best you can actually do, because these kind of libraries, they are doing the escaping for you. So you just have to say, okay, this is the value, and they're doing the escaping. And in case of escaping, it would be like they would use this whole statement I injected in here as the search term. If I would have implemented this in here, which means actually escaping, use ORM, but also, which I could actually add here, do not write SQL statements on your own unless you absolutely have to do that. Yeah, just use the library for SQL statements and make sure that the content is escaped. In some other languages, it's called also binding parameters. It's depending on the library you're using, but do not use user content directly for anything without escaping it. So if I have to nail down my talk to one thing, it is like escape everything you get from a user and you're using, nevertheless, where it is. I'm so sorry I talked so much about XSS that we didn't come to CSRF, which is actually a very, very nice topic, but I guess I will just do it the next time. And thank you very much. What about some questions? I guess somebody wanted to ask a question, but is he muted?
That's the second time I've done that to myself today.
Happens to all of us all the time.
It does. It wouldn't be a virtual conference if someone wasn't muted on the stream. So, because we're running short of time, I'll pull this one in again. Do modern web frameworks make these mistakes easier to avoid, e.g. by handling safe and unsafe data separately?
Yes. For example, Django is doing a very, very good job. I love Django. I love the architecture. I love the security stuff. Definitely, they're doing it much more simpler. But still, you should know about that, because what actually most of my job is telling experienced developers why they are doing is. For example, CSRF tokens. Why are you using CSRF tokens? Ask this to the developer. Most of them, it's something with security. But yeah, I think it's very important to know the reasons behind, but they make it simpler.
Yeah, Yeah, I think they also do help you catch a lot of easy mistakes that someone else has already thought about, so they help you out on that front. Although, be careful, some of them definitely make it easier for you to make a mistake.
It depends. It really depends. So, for example, if you have like, let's put another very famous Python framework in there, so Flask, which is like actually the complete opposite from a framework perspective compared with Django, really huge, Flask, very, very simple. You have to think about these kind of attacks on your own there if you're not using special libraries who have the security already incorporated. So yeah, be careful, but I think like at least a lot of XSS attacks are very, very covered by template engines, for example, right? So I know one good PHP library, to be honest. I'm not so much of a PHP fan, although I had to program in it. So, but I love the trick templating engine because they say I'm always escaping. I don't care what you want as a developer. I'm always escaping. If you want to unescape it, you have to do some extra work to get it unescaped. But then I'm telling you this is not secure, and I think they gave a warning in the past. So that's really, really nice. There's some libraries who really emphasize the security concern and say, okay, if you do that, you're really open for security attacks, like React is doing it with dangerously set inner HTML.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I guess you'll just have to take your CSRF into the hallway track and have a chat with everyone there. Thank you very much, and it's been fun doing debugging from halfway across the earth while you're live on stream.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the technical problems. I did not
It
thought
had to
about the
happen
alert.
eventually.
Yeah, I thought my website was broken with all the bugs, but it was the screen sharing.
Perfect. We will be back at 4:30 Australian Eastern Time, so we'll see you all shortly.